Version 2. Now, I don't know if I can ever live my life the same. Who was walking toward the angel pulling a small pocket knife from his chest. I was still holding the crowbar, though I didn't even realize it until that moment when the entire atmosphere had shifted. Andrew too crumpled quickly, falling to the ground in front of me with a thud, and knocking his head on the hard floor. Something doesn't sit right about him. I ran in and made sure that every light was on and I started going at it. Locked, deadbolt, and I didn't stop there. Look, I'm not talking to anybody unless they come to me asking about what happened, and even then, it's likely that they'll never really believe me. Andrew too has got to be gone for good now, so maybe they'll just think that he torched it for insurance, but the deed went wrong. Sounds from hell were what started all around me. I need you to understand just how little I am willing to mess around with whatever's going on here. Whatever the hell was in there might just be some spooky spirit, but that thing out there could very well be an in-real-life murderer. He said that it was a glorious sight, everybody quickly realizing their baptism in the waters of heaven led to burning as if by the fires of hell. Nobody is safe in a haunted temple too. Tuesday I was off and so I just stayed home and played Shadow of the Erd Tree. I'm sorry that I start talking in plural when I'm freaked out. I have no idea how else to describe it, but the light was just radiating from it in waves, washing over me as it did. I wish I wasn't, but it was coming from behind that green door too. Kind of took me off guard, to be honest. Things are still the massive blur and I'm completely freaked out by it. So Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays I do a couple of late nights and it's all good. They told me they wanted a more thorough cleaning once a week, whatever day that I chose, so I just decided to make my Wednesday nights the long ones. The story was kind of believable when he was telling me. And here we are, I've been up for hours on end because I can't get that face out of my mind. I don't know what the cause of the scream was, but I could tell that it was in the building. Dead. Washing the windows was going okay, but I still kept the deadbolt and everything on the door and every light on. All good, all fine. There was a bright flash, and I could hear a voice saying, "Thank you." He must have known what I was there about, not that he looked scared or anything, just concerned. Before I could even get a word out, he asked me what had happened. The sun was still up, so I was planning on hitting this place quick and getting the hell out before it got dark again. I hurried in out of the heat, thankful that at least the AC worked if this place was haunted as hell. All I know is that it was guttural, like the sound of grief in the rawest form. Even the ones that get into my garbage every night. He lifted the knife, getting ready to strike if need be. I didn't really notice anything until I looked up and out the door from the end of the hallway. I could see straight down the beige hall. Not to mention that I still don't know what the heck was going on behind that green door too. That scream sounded human and I could swear that I heard somebody saying hello after the first knock. I don't know what to trust anymore though after this morning. I got a text from Andrew to know what it said because I expected it to read along the lines of what happened here. But no, wow, cleanest that I've seen the place in years. Amazing job, thank you. What the hell? I'm going to do some research, maybe see if I can find anything in the cemetery or the temple too. Heck, I'm about to look into Andrew too himself, going to do some research and maybe see if I can find anything in the cemetery or the temple too. Heck, I'm about to look into Andrew too himself. Meanwhile, there was this thing howling in pain in the corner. Andrew too assured me that I was safe, but that there was nothing behind that door. I grew up on the internet, wild west of LiveLeak and LimeWire, and this might be the first time that I've really gotten a comprehension of man's depravity. This man was evil. I'm describing it from memory, so bear with me. There could be somebody hurt down here, or by the sounds of it, multiple people. I gave it one more good knock, figuring the third time was the charm. Like, I get why the job pays so much now, but the chances of me finding anything else right now are slim. My landlord is chomping at the bit to evict me so that he can raise the rent again. Either way, he assured me, and I took my leave for the afternoon, telling him that I would be back after service. Was I going to have to be here for a while after dark? Yeah, but the bonus was $600, so who are you to judge me? It wasn't until I was back home that I really started thinking about it. But somehow I got out of there and tore the hell out of the parking lot. I got in, walked to the little supply closet in the back of the sanctuary, and I pulled out the vacuum. Wednesday night service wasn't very crowded, usually just a few grandmas and the really devout couple of middle-aged men with their thick study Bibles, so nothing was really dirty. I figured I could milk the clock a little by dusting around and just messing about in general. Might as well get some money while I'm in here. If somebody tries to make a basement around here, they're just going to get a room of crumbling mud and humidity. I ran my butt inside so fast that I should be on a plane to the Paris Olympics. I ran my butt inside so fast that I should be on a plane to the Paris Olympics. From his story, the temple too was hit badly by a plague back in the early 1800s. I'm not really religious, but a baptism pit filling with blood seems a little sacrilegious, I guess. I wasn't waiting around to debate the ethical implications of a bloody ghost bath, though. In front of me, the temple too was ablaze, a full inferno already. I kept making my way forward though, determined to find the source. And that was when he started taking a different route than prayer and praise. Andrew too had gathered his flock in the temple too one day, bringing them all together in a marathon of praise and worship to God. He brought in water, lining up all the parishioners to bring through the baptism tub. I knocked on the door again and still nothing. When I looked back toward the cemetery, there was a tall, dark-suited man with a wide-brimmed hat, just kind of standing in front of one of the graves. Second of all, honestly, if it gets down to it, I might. I tried calling the cops again and my phone died right then and there. At this point, I am decidedly not chill and I'm debating whether it's my best move to just hide in here or risk getting to my car. My sense of peace had faded, turning to confront Andrew too, who was walking toward the angel pulling a small pocket knife from his chest. He even said that he would be willing to supply me with more if I find that I'm not quite happy yet. I was religious in my younger days, but had since really drifted off. If you're a former Christian of any sort, you've heard that. One big sanctuary makes up most of the place, with a couple of little rooms in the back behind the main altar. A little door on the right side led back into a small hallway that smelled of mildew, with two doors on the left and one on the other end of the hall. I'll update if anything happens, but I really don't plan on being there overnight again until I absolutely have to. The screams were back, with every face distorting in terror as sound pierced the air. Though looking back, it must have just been a very deep coma. It turns out that's BS. Andrew too said that most of the congregation had perished, with the only survivors being the single pastor in his family, who somehow made full, prosperous recoveries. Totally not shady at all, right? What he tells me from here is all conjecture, because supposedly he can only theorize. My muscles loosening as the aura continued. Help us. I was honestly going and expecting to be gassed. That is insane. The place is old and from what they've told me when I started, it's at least a couple of centuries. Built in colonial times and renovated and rebuilt over the years on the same land. From there, it was just pulling on the rope, slicing the bags open with nails in the rafters. From there, it was just pulling on the rope, slicing the bags open with nails on the rafters, causing a caustic snow to fall down on the soaked congregation. There was this look that I just couldn't quite place, maybe concern. And then he gave me some BS answer about how he had done a spring cleaning back in May, so there was nothing to worry about. Where the temple too once stood was nothing but a pile of ash, not even one board left standing. From what Andrew too told me, he picked up on some Galajikai superstitious customs when he had started getting paranoid. They said that spirits can't cross through, mistaking the blue for water so he would be safe. Hell, I'll bring some for them. Look, if I'm going to die, let it be by some instant a 13 ghost mess. He waited a moment for them to stop before he started it again. This man literally said, "I'm not going to confuse you with the details, but I studied a bit of dark practices." His family were some of the first sick, with this son even supposedly thought to be dead at one point. It must have known that I wasn't the same as whoever put it here. That was when it opened its mouth, rancid, decayed breath blowing into my face. If I had eaten anything since yesterday morning, I might have puked then and there. I mean, what kind of BS is that? It was all that I could think of though, in the crux of what I needed to know. Leave and have no job with my entire mental state totally messed up by this encounter and nobody to believe me. I could look out into the sanctuary and see that the congregation was already there. I don't know if it was the adrenaline or what, but I suddenly got some Hulk-level strength and braced my foot against the doorframe, pushing the crowbar in even harder. It took minutes before they all passed, killing everybody in the temple too except for Andrew too. Right as I let the third knock go, things went to hell. There wasn't even anything there. I tried making up some excuse about not being able to do it tonight because a family event or something. I felt at peace for the first time in ages and I knew that it wasn't my antidepressants. And that was when I took a full look at the creature in the room. Who knows, maybe I'll get arrested. Either way, I thought that it was a legitimate possibility. I'm not going to stereotype or anything, but we've had a number of evangelical preachers doing shady stuff in the news lately. My conscience wouldn't let me pass, and so I ran into town before I was due to go back after Wednesday's service. I bought a set of bowl cutters in a crowbar. I'm finding out what's in that dang thing. Even with a little vandalism, I kept everything hidden in my car until Andrew too left. He gave me some platitudes about still being there and being a dependable employee that he could count on. I couldn't entirely place it. Andrew too told me how his son Peter fell ill first, having trouble breathing before slowly degrading, coughing blood from his lungs and soon after going into a deep, death-like sleep. He finally left around 9 right when the sun went down, and I was finishing up vacuuming the sanctuary. I waited and made sure that he was gone for a few, just sitting in one of the pews waiting so that I could make sure nobody saw me getting bolt cutters out of my car. But this thing looked like multiple torsos all conjoined. I expected to be staring into thin air, but I'm seeing into the back of this thing's skull. When I told Pastor Andrew too about the thump coming from behind the green door too, he had the briefest flicker of something on his face, and then it was right back into smiling preacher mode, like baby Billy. Told me there was a problem with possums digging into the basement and not finding their way out. The only person left there was Andrew too at this point, but even then we only briefly passed each other as he was heading out. There was not much to say of the interaction though. We just exchanged pleasantries and he said that he was off to get some shut-eye. I can still smell the stench of that thing, the decay from its breath. I go every inch of God's good house with a fine-tooth comb. There was no way that there was a room there. He even apologized that he hadn't told me before, saying that it wasn't okay and offering me a bonus for my troubles. Yeah, this was starting to sound like there was a lot more at play here. I'm not chill with being murdered by a human. I made it to my car fine but turned to walk back into the temple too when a line of dark figures were suddenly standing among the cemetery headstones. None of them moved, they just stared at me. It definitely upped my speed to get back into the temple too, and I slammed the door behind me. Even if he said they couldn't harm me, I mean heck, that could have been a lie too. Who knows at this point? I got right back in there and locked that door, deadbolted, whatever I needed to do. When it opened its mouth, I snatched my keys off the pew and tore off down the middle aisle. I found Andrew too in his office. He was surprised to see me at the least, and there really wasn't much else that I could do at this point. Just pouring some into his son's mouth brought him out of his coma in hours. Unless there's some massive concrete bunker under here. I don't know how anything more than a crawlspace could be under there. I didn't have anything with me and I wasn't going to drive the 30 minutes to get back home either with my busted air conditioner. There wasn't much of a choice, so I just started doing whatever I could and doing it fast. Or I could die. Phone said that it was around 9:30, so not much time since sundown, and that's when I realized that I forgot to bring my phone charger, which was just really fantastic. The lights flickered briefly at first, but they kept going sporadically. Never actually goes off for more than seconds at a time, but it always flickers on just enough to mess with my vision. I wanted to throw up right then and there, seeing all the crimson splattering everywhere against the white backdrop. Anyway, I'm off until tomorrow night after Wednesday's service. I'll probably try to do an early clean again in the daylight so I don't have to deal with this again. Me and the spirits can be chill. He baptized them one by one, making sure that they were thoroughly drenched. Once everybody was soaked, back at their pew ready to begin another hymn, he took his place at the pulpit and let loose the plan. I don't really know what to say. Said that he absolutely needed it cleaned by tomorrow. But then I realized that I had to turn the lights off at the altar and leave through the main sanctuary door. I swear that I'm not scared of the dark, but I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't creeped out a little. I've never really believed in any kind of supernatural. I suddenly felt my heart rate relax. That was when I really leveled with him, just one question to ask. Am I safe or should I quit? Yeah, it seems like a stupid question, I know. They found him and his entire family dead down in that room one day, door and room freshly painted with a bright seafoam blue. I get overlooked incredibly easily with information, and this was, if you really want to put it literally, a biblical amount of it. The Temple 2 goers would apparently gather often, even staying at the Temple 2 for days, worshipping and praying for a cure. I ran down the hall and into the office next to the green door too, and even got to the pastor's office while I was at it. Obviously, seeing the Undertaker making his WWE return in the middle of a graveyard was not on my agenda last night. No worries, just wiping the window. I don't know what's going on. The heat coming off was intense, immediately drying any of the humid air around me. It raged up with the sound of rising alongside the smoke, before totally incinerating in the dark night, flames dying out just as quickly as they began. With my headphones in and music going, I just kept doing my cleaning. I was the Reddit atheist back in the beginning. She assured me that it was a cellar, though she only was told this by Pastor Andrew too. I have always liked horror stuff, but the idea of ghosts and stuff in the real world, please. He assured me that the spirits wouldn't harm me, simply trying to get me to do what they wanted. I turned off the light and saw the moon shining through the stained glass, and I immediately got a chill again. It's been nearly 100 degrees with full humidity the past few days, and it felt like I was being dunked in ice water. I had to squint to see them almost, but they were definitely in the first 2 rows outside of the light. I'm going to throw this out there if you want intricate details of the rest of the night. You're not going to get a lot. Blue door glowing bright in the fluorescent end of the sanctuary. Except then the question of, what the heck does a congregation of ghost Christians want me to do for them? Open the door, that's what they wanted me to do according to Andrew too. According to him, the ashes of the preacher and his family are stored down there. That was about the time that I noticed one of the shadows longer than the other. At this point, I'm out of a job, so it might be the preferable alternative to finding a job in the current economy. I turned around to grab my keys, which were still sitting on the pew. Considering how crappy everything pays right now, I was beyond hyped when I found an opening for a night janitor paying $40 an hour. So, that was messed up. The chains holding the angel snapped, freeing it immediately. I don't even know what happened after that. I turned around, ready to find my way out of the temple too and just say hell with this for the night. Except I turned back toward the sanctuary to leave and saw an entire congregation standing there before the lights flickered off again. Like they were sewn together, all standing back to back in a circle. Each one of them had different features, but each one was covered in eyes, blinking every different color that I knew of, and some that I couldn't quite comprehend. Maybe see if I could get through the green door too. I vacuumed the sanctuary with no problem, and I went to go get the back hallway next. I don't think that I've ever felt goosebumps like I did when I looked down that hall. That sounded bigger than any possum that I've ever seen. I put it in power saver mode and just hit work even harder. This was not that time, so I decided that for now we're safe in here and we're going to chalk all this up to being a big misunderstanding late at night. She said that she had always thought there were angels around this place, keeping watch over the flock. I don't know how angelic that sounds, but I guess she hasn't been here alone after dark. If I ate that finger, he said, would have prosperity beyond belief. All I had to do was believe in him and eat of the flesh. I only had the altar lights on because they were pretty dang bright. Until you get into the hallway at least, then you can barely see because the light only extends a few pews out. It was a woman, I think. Take the little wins where I can, I guess. But then it stopped. Nothing surprising there, considering that we knew nothing about diseases and spread them everywhere. I slammed the dang thing behind me too, and I started to walk to my car before realizing that it didn't lock it. Even though once they get into my garbage every night I started calling it round Ronald, no way a possum was going to get that fierce with a door. They cancelled Sunday service, so I was off. I'm going back in tonight after the prayer meetings and doing a little cleaning, so I'll update if there's anything that happens. I want to chalk it up to just being in a strange place at night, but there's no way those chills were based on nothing. The story I got at that point in the day already seemed like BS, or at least, not the entire story. And then came the singing, that same hymnal as the last time. I started wishing that I hadn't deadbolt and chained the door when I was too shaky to pull it open. Not scary by itself, but the dark hollow sockets instead of eyes were what really got me. Yet they're the only ones that survived. Never thought that I would be thankful for the sun staying up until 9 in the summer, but here we are. Maybe it's just my willingness to buy in thanks to just having my experience validated. Probably a good time to mention this sanctuary has 2 sets of lights, one for the front altar and the other for the actual pews and seating area. Wednesday night after service I went in around 8:30 to start my cleaning. I'm not scared of the dark, but I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't creeped out a little. And then he dropped the bomb that they're hosting a wedding tomorrow, so I'm going to need to do a deep clean. Oh come on, I wasn't prepared for this. He said that he cut off a foot for each of his family, making a stew for them while they were sick, just pouring some into his son's mouth that brought him out of his coma in hours. I remember it from going to an old Baptist temple too with my grandma. I'm still not entirely sure if he was trying to get me to quit then and there too. Swear to God, I've never cleaned that fast in my life. The angel charged an aura of anger and fury, taking over the blue, turning it to a crimson red. I could still hear it in my car when I started it and whipped out of the little dirt parking lot. Getting ungodly amounts of dust, may I add, when something suddenly thumped hard against the window. Honestly, with how hard it hit, I don't know how the window didn't break. A little weird, but whatever. I was honestly on board with that explanation. Before I knew it, the sun had gone down without me even realizing. The temple 2 lights were so bright with the stained glass that it was hard to notice when it got dark, but now it felt like the lights were a haven. I think back on it and I should have felt more terrified, but the aura of it was peaceful, like it was speaking to me through it. Be not afraid. Before he could walk into the hall I got his attention, asking if he wanted me to clean up the room behind the green door too. They haven't had a new residence since the 1800s, I think. It was much darker, but I was already shook. I mentioned a while back that I've been agnostic at best since leaving an evangelical Southern Baptist temple too over a decade ago. It was simply a small room sealed out of respect or adherence to the dead, whatever I wanted to call it. Out of respect or adherence to the dead, whatever I wanted to call it. The bright blue light was actually emanating from the thing, almost like an anime aura. The congregation, the swelling music and hymns, the shadows in the cemetery, and the blood pouring from the baptism faucet. Everything was out in the open, and he acknowledged what I was saying, though he didn't say much as I was going through my story. I cut off the padlock, cut the chain. Heck, I was barely saved thanks to the clumsy recovery reflexes that I've honed on my life. It took me a minute, but I steeled myself and went out the front door, looking right around the corner to where the window was at. Whatever was in there didn't even register for me at first. In the rural backwater swamp of Georgia, $40 an hour to clean a temple too. Not with my ears but through the waves. Until I told him about the screaming through the green door too. Good God, I see why they pay that high now. They were definitely behind the door, but if spirits aren't allowed to cross in, we're definitely behind the door, but if spirits aren't allowed to cross in, then why the hell are they there? Is my haunting logic broken? Like something wasn't sitting right with me and about how he was acting. Something about what he was saying was giving me that there was more to everything, and so I decided to solve this once and for all. And then he began convincing them that it was time to be rebaptized in the blood of the Lord, cleansing them of their illnesses. I looked around, but nothing. He says that he's had experiences too. For a moment I thought it was a massive bundle of limbs at first, which isn't totally off base. The angel's flesh is quite literally made of miracles, he said. And then he gave me the ultimatum. I literally asked him if he was trying to get me to eat it. I asked Anita about it on Friday night when I went in, made sure that I was out by nightfall this time though. It sounded like a whole cinder block, but it must have hit just right on the window trim to absorb the impact. No signal, and somehow, even though I put power saver mode on, I was at 15% battery. Takes maybe 2 or 3 hours every night, and I do an afternoon clean on Sundays between services. He was superstitious after losing his entire flock to a plague. Things are going to be rough. I'm still shaken up, and the anxiety about what's going to happen is literally killing me. And yes, I know there are going to be some people asking me why I just don't quit or break open the lock. And suddenly I was standing out in the cemetery. He stepped toward the angel, flicking the pocket knife against one of the outstretched hands, slicing a finger off and catching it before he turned to me. It was only a moment until there was a faint answer, like a hello, I think. I kind of chased down my courage and shot it through the door, asking who they were. It took me a few minutes, but I started to kind of calm down and try to rationalize everything. With the other effect being a major extension on my life. 2 options, and neither of which were great for me. At least 7 or 8 people were sitting in the pews just out of the light's reach. They were all dressed in black, heads bowed so faces couldn't be seen. Every single one was fixed on me though, and that's when I noticed pieces of them missing. I was just desperate to get into the temple too and out of the swamp heat. It was until I was cleaning windows that stuff started getting weird. I swear to whatever God you want to hold me to, that there was the sound of footsteps thudding along behind me. So imagine my surprise when he tells me that I'm physically in no danger. He probably realized that I didn't believe him too. I thought about just not going back, leaving it be until the next person got there on Friday for a prayer group. I think he's being a lot more secretive about something than he lets on. I've been wearing earbuds most of the time since because it just keeps on ringing. Crimson Peak maybe. My little agnostic heart was ready to pull up for an altar call once they finally hired me. I turned the key and yanked it out at the same time, almost taking the doorknob with me, and I ran the hell out of there. My first Monday night clean went off without a problem. Went in and just ran a vacuum over the floor after a prayer group meeting. Normally it would look just like your average old Protestant temple too in the south, except it gets a little weird. The first door on the left is painted blue, and not like a regular blue either, like a bright cerulean. It's both padlocked and deadbolt from the outside though, and only the pastor Andrew too has a key to it. When I was talking to Anita, the treasurer who had hired me, she told me that she had no idea what was down there, but it was probably just old storage or something. Wasn't there some movie where the ghosts were trying to give hints about how somebody needed help? Like they were doing terrifying, haunting stuff but really only trying to help. They only did old hymnals and refused to use anything but a piano, but I remember the words. Nothing can for sin atone, nothing but the blood of Jesus. But then came the screaming. Nothing was there though, only the small worn-down graveyard a few feet away from the temple too, made even creepier by the shadows being cast from the saturated light of a sodium bulb. My eyesight isn't great, and I sure didn't get close. Nothing was there when I looked back, with it looking just like it had when I had left it, back, with it looking just like it had when I had left it. I had no idea what I was looking at. Well, number one, I am so poor. He popped the finger into his mouth so casually like it was popcorn, said that he was a devout man his entire life, believing God would send salvation for him and his flock, until the disease came. I don't know if it could sense something or just went off guesswork, but it was asking me for help. And that was when Andrew too spoke from the steps behind me. They wanted me to pull out the whole carpet cleaner. Bright skin, shining like the sun, was giving off the aura. It took me a minute to get moving again, but I had to know if I was right. It was still going, too, with a few stops in between the loud roars of anger and despair. Instead, I screamed like a Looney Tunes character and started running for my keys sitting on the first pew. Thankfully, the lights came back on steadily and it was no longer occupied by whatever ghostly temple two goers were there just a few seconds before. I took my attention from the sanctuary to the green door too for just a few seconds, but it was long enough for everybody in the sanctuary to suddenly disappear. I was in the hallway at that point, and I was in the middle of trying to rip myself in half so that I could run away. I don't know what it was. All I know is that I was face to face with one of the dozens of good Temple 2 patrons that now filled the sanctuary. The keys were in my hands, jingling like wind chimes because I was shaking so hard. I finally got the key in and started to turn it when sound started reverberating from the sanctuary, a chorus with an organ swelling to a crescendo. It kept going too, but it sounded so far away down there that I'm not really sure how it could. The only question that I could really think to ask was how. I'm sorry if the details are vague. So despite everything in me telling me to get the hell out, I turned around to go unlock the door. The lights went out and the gospel music began. All I had to do was believe in him and eat of the flesh. Maybe they'll decide to be quiet for once. It almost made me fall off the ladder though. All good, we're getting through this. It didn't make sense with the outside of the temple too. Just to focus on the areas where people move through and to keep things nice. I kind of just shook it off as having like a late night heebie-jeebies moment, you know. Except I finished up right there and started locking up. It takes maybe 7 hours or so to go through everything, and it's the easiest money that I've ever made. Not especially planning on it unless it's high noon and the sun is shining. I briefly closed my eyes and reopened them, but they were still there. And then there was a loud thump on the green door too, like something being thrown hard against it, but there wasn't a sound of it falling down either. My fight or flight came in hard. I don't know how I swung the crowbar at as fast as I did, and maybe adrenaline again, but it bashed at the side of his head. I pulled my phone out and turned on the flashlight, making a quick pace towards the front doors. That's all that I needed to do. I'm proud to report that I did not, despite popular reports, soil myself in that moment. For $40 an hour, I'm not going to skimp either. I worked in haunts for a while and I can deal with this scary type stuff. As long as I know that it can't hurt me and it won't kill me. The amount of death in one building would definitely be a magnet for weird stuff. But Andrew too insists that the spirits are still looking for the preacher, believing that he has sacrificed them for his own family to live. On a temple too, yeah sure, I'll just take an edible before I go in. I approached him after the last of the older men left, giving a hearty wave and to see you Wednesday along with it. Pastor Andrew too started to walk back to his office as I was starting to get my usual cleaning supplies out. No answer. The scream seemed to layer on itself like a host of people all crying out in unison. It drowned out the gospel music, which started growing fainter behind me. That kind of reinforced my feelings about what I was going to do that night too. I had to ask her again when she said, Down there because we're in the heart of Georgia swamp country. My eyes were doing that thing where you can't see in the dark after coming in from the bright sun, making everything in the dark vague. I'm certain that every dog in the Tri-County area must have been perked up, because this thing still haunts me, like it's burned into my mind because it was right there in my face, almost nose to nose if it had one. The face was waxy, almost like eggshell white skin. I don't know that I really believe them. I was face to face with I don't know who it was. It sounded like a very veiled warning though, like telling me to tread carefully with whatever I do tonight. I grew up watching horror and stuff. That I was going to grab my keys and make the run to my car. It was probably a gravestone, right? Like a taller one with one of those weird sculptures on it. I've never looked too close at it to be able to tell, to be honest. Like, I'm genuinely still. And started hitting at it with the crowbar when things began going to hell. I was right. Something changed on his face, worry maybe. Deep crimson was pouring out of the faucet, interspersed with intense blasts of a rusty, dirty black like swamp water. I knocked on the door, giving a second to see if there was any response. I mean hell, I remember puking every morning before going to my call center healthcare job. Getting screamed at and told you're the reason some boomer is going to die. They can be really messed up. Dusting corners, scrubbing down filthy baseboards. I wanted to gag, and that's not to mention that I keep hearing the sound of blood splashing in the baptism tub. Did you know that blood splashing sounds different than water splashing? I think it's because of the consistency of it. He just kind of smiled. I don't really know what to say. Like, I'm genuinely still. The encounter on Monday night had messed me up. The baptism pit was running, quickly splashing as the tub filled. I took a gulp, turned around, and that's when things went totally crazy. And he just told me to come back after the event was over. It finally gave, crashing in hard to the wall as I swung it in. Deep blue light was pouring from below, showing faintly at the end of a long staircase. First off, I don't know how the heck there was a basement this deep in swamp-ass Georgia. Nothing about a lot of this makes sense, to be honest. But I could hear the screams again, this time louder, full of force and drilling into my brain. I was even more unsure about it if it was something real. Not of good that I have done, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Water started splattering behind me. Even I feel like it's stereotypical, but I've heard it. It's an easy enough schedule too. I go in after Temple 2 services or meetings, do some basic cleaning, and dip out. Pretty sure that I hit the ditch on the way out too, but I sure as heck wasn't going to stop. It wasn't until I was a few minutes into my driveway that my hand finally loosened on the steering wheel, and I realized what they were singing. If this keeps up, I might start praying while I'm there. And he trapped the thing with whatever it was. That's why it was still chained down here, letting him pick pieces off whenever he wanted. There was that one nagging little feeling that this could be somebody who was in trouble. I could feel the light. Not like when you sit in the sun for too long and start to burn though, this was like water washing over me. I was expecting him to tell me the opposite though. Nerves going a few fewer miles per hour, I decided to go back to cleaning windows. That was about all that was left other than cleaning the baptism pool, and that was simple as a quick scrub since it didn't seem to be used often. It's really not fun like at all, but I would honestly take it again at this point if it paid the same as this place. I went in last night to clean after the prayer meetings, except I went in a little early to see if I could actually catch Andrew too. I'm in here flipping more tables than Jesus to make sure they're clean. Out of respect for the dead family, the Temple 2ES kept the door blue since then. I flipped every light switch on and ran down the hall into Andrew 2's office. I shut that door and deadbolted it too. Arms and legs were cut off, leaving bleeding stumps that were gushing as if cut recently. There was a steady trickle of bright red falling from the creature, chained to a wall in the small room. The bodies looked frail, malnourished and emaciated. Despite that, they were still pristinely clean, even bleeding. Its eyes remained fixed on me, a pleading in them. Sure enough, I pulled up and he was already there, a car in the parking lot. I want you to know that what you're about to read may shake your faith a little. I went in early on Wednesday evening, hoping to catch Andrew too before anybody else got there. Ice in my veins. Unfortunately, I was right, but I couldn't settle for just leaving it at that. In short, Andrew too told me that what I was experiencing were former parishioners. It spoke to me again, this time more frail than the first. His explanation made me even more sick. Fingers crossed, at least. Mistake number 2. Maybe Andrew too was trying for a budding sound effects career in Atlanta, I don't know. I was trying to rationalize a lot of things until it hit me. There's a little cemetery out behind it too, though many of the graves are too worn down to read at this point. He had the audacity to offer it to me, like it was a snack. I felt my stomach turn harder than it did, a smelling dust breath, with zero idea of what was going on. And so I told him everything. It didn't work, mind you. There was a street light that illuminated the entire side, giving me a pretty clear view. I don't know what is past that door, but if things start looking like there might be somebody trapped down there, I'm not past some vandalism. I can't just leave somebody here if something's going on. That would make me just as responsible now, wouldn't it? I swear to God, if my mama hadn't raised me, my butt would have been gone faster than my dad. All because their heart medication was denied by the insurance and they had to pay $3. But still the preacher insisted that they stay steadfast in the Lord, praying for forgiveness even as the bodies began piling up out back. That one got him. But then I realized the money that I would lose if I didn't do something right and lost the job. Look, rent is high right now and I've got bills to pay. Maybe 30 minutes later I was up on the stepladder going down the stained glass windows with a soft rag and warm water. It's really gross. The sound that came out of me was like a car hitting the brakes at 70 miles an hour. I don't know, maybe after all this, I'll have an angel watching out for me. So it started bringing me to other questions like, if he was willing to tell me that, why not just show me? Spirits couldn't slip in behind that easily, right? It should just be an empty room, right? But then I thought about the screams that I heard. And then I grabbed my phone and started to make a call to whatever officer that they would send out here. The organ came to life, screeching and out of tune. Hell, he said that he was terrified by almost the same thing happening to him as I had on Monday night, way back when he first came here. Yeah, not gonna lie, I've worked some really awful jobs, but next to nothing has had me feeling this kind of anxiety before going in. Not a soul around. And that was when the angel appeared. According to Andrew too, it was sent as punishment for the blasphemy that he had just committed. The cherry on the top of the whole thing, you know. At least I still had about half a battery. I swung the door open and practically dived through. I never felt so good to feel swamp heat on my skin. I don't know if there was anything behind them. Meanwhile, this obviously would spread the disease among the flock, just damning them all one by one. It finally gave, crashing in hard to the wall as I swung it in. Everybody in that cemetery was once a member of this temple too who had perished in that plague. This is all from what I can remember in a very rapid escalation that came next. Sort of like floating down a lazy river, feeling the current flow past you toward the sea. I thought that I had caught a break, thought that I was going to grab my keys and make the run to my car. Except, oh yeah, I'm in the middle of freaking nowhere. He had set up a rope ahead of calling over everyone, tagging up socks of lie in the rafters.